So Mr. Short, I observed your math block on Friday of last week. So how do you feel the lesson went?
I feel the lesson went pretty well when we just took our mid-chapter checkpoint yesterday, and after looking at it, I feel like they have a pretty strong grasp of the concept that we went over that day. In fact, probably out of all the concepts, that was the one that they grasped the best.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about student knowledge, helping, assessments, helping to demonstrate what students get,
Mm-hmm.
it seems that lesson went very well for them.
Okay. So going with that being the strongest component of their mid-chapter checkpoint, can you talk to me about the strategies that you used?
Just a lot of communicating with their peers and trying to get a lot of physical engagement so that they aren't just sitting and listening to a lecture, but they're actively engaged. I think that helped. Kagan strategies, structures help to solidify some of the learning because it promotes a higher level of engagement between the students. So I feel like that is something that helps with their ability to understand what they're learning.
Okay. What concerns did you have about the lesson?
I would say my biggest concern is when I realized that one of the students didn't even have her worksheet out, and I was like, what's happening over here? So it's just, it's such a new class still, and such a different group of the higher students
than about that.
We had last year. So it is jarring how different teaching these lessons this year feels compared to last year. So for me, most of my concern is actually not in students, but in myself, trying to change the pace so that it accommodates the students that are there now versus the students that I had taught previously. So for me, the only concern that I really have is just making sure that I'm slowing the pace down, because this group doesn't move as fast as the group from last year, which I know sounds like, well, they're not the same group, so why wouldn't you? But it's only my second year teaching fifth grade. So my only exposure to how fast high achieving fifth graders do was that 1 year. So this is a different group of students, so it's a very different learning curve for me.
Right. So this, I guess you kind of addressed my next question. Has your reflection on it triggered any actions?
Yeah, I suppose one of the benefits of teaching a grade a second year in a row is I can look back at what I planned for last year, and I can see oh, this is what we did. And so this past weekend as I was planning, I looked at those plans and I was like, nope, not this group. So I'm changing some of the activities that we're doing to make sure that we're getting these learners. Last year I used a lot, before we started board math last year, I used a lot of the enrich activities that were at the front of the chapter, and I feel like a lot of those activities are too high for some of the students that I have. So taking that out, pulling out some of the reteach worksheets that go with the Go Math, because I feel like they, for some reason to me, that's a better breakdown of how to actually do what we're teaching than sometimes the lesson that we do. I like that they, give a very clear step-by-step guide, whereas some of the worksheets that are in the Go Math, it seems very convoluted and filled with excess information. So looking at those and seeing how I can incorporate those, because this group needs more support then.
So are you finding that you're doing fewer numbers of problems and just doing more, I don't want to say quality explicit instruction, but a deeper explicit instruction for them?
Yes, quality, so the instructional time has increased and the independent practice time has decreased some, and I'm reducing the number of problems that students actually have to do to demonstrate their proficiency, because I'm finding that 6 problems is too much for some of these kids. So it's overwhelming, it's discouraging to them. So I'm doing a lot using the checkmark questions, and then trying to look at that and seeing how we're doing, using like just the emotions of it, like the emotional overall feeling of the classroom, you know, like looking at their faces and see if we've got like deadpan or how they're feeling to kind of gauge, you know, what we're going to do. We've also, this year, I don't know why, maybe it's because we took out those 3 days of the beginning of the year assessment, and we took out 2 days of the chapter pretest like we had done. So almost all of my lessons are going 2 days long. There are a few lessons where I'm like, I'm only going to teach this for a day because the concept or what's being covered isn't as important as these. So like today we started 2-digit by 2-digit. So it's going to be a 2 day long lesson. And looking at last year, the number of 2-day lessons versus 1 day lessons are greater because of this time that we have available. So I'm trying to dedicate 1 day simply to the procedures behind how to do it and using the Kagan structures to do that. Like, so I give you 6 steps, and now we're going to go you, me, or you, me around the group to review the steps and do the procedural structures. And then the next day, when we're working on the assignment, independent practice or guided practice, we're doing more of the structures that support the actual work. So.
Okay. I have our sheet of, I went through and I made a list, and I guess I gave you copies, of what I saw you demonstrate as areas of strength, and then areas of growth. And the areas of growth were more areas that I just had clarification questions because I was only in there for about an hour. But perhaps the greatest area of strength I've noticed, and you can just feel it in the classroom, is the classroom climate itself. You can tell that you pride yourself on the cleanliness and organization of your classroom. I know that you're using the structure laid out by Kagan with the seating arrangement. But what are some other things that you're doing to enhance the teams that you've laid out?
So we just spent probably the first day. I don't think we spent much beyond that first day, but the first day we really triggered in on the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, and the ability for us to make mistakes, and that the expectation when I say let's talk to our face partner, that's what I expect to happen. It's not an invitation for someone to sit there and disengage, but that the expectation is that we're leaning in towards each other, and or if it's shoulder, we're turning and facing our partners, and just that action alone, that expectation and the understanding that is what is expected, that you don't just get to sit back and watch, really helps them, and I hold them accountable to that. So if I see them not talking, or I like observe that they're just kind of like I call it riding someone else's brain train. I call them out on it. I mean, not like across the room, like get off that brain train. I mean, sometimes I might, if I see multiple people do it, I might get off that brain train, but just that they understand that and we talk about a lot about how the only way I can help them get better is if I understand really what they're bad at, and that it's not just about showing what we're good at, but that I have to see what we're bad at as well. And I feel like that climate helps them to relax. They're not sitting there thinking, oh, I don't want to make a mistake. They, like, from day one, I share that that's what I expect is mistakes. And so I think that helps them too. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Did I answer it?
And to, ride on the growth mindset that you addressed, I didn't tally, but it was pretty consistent that you kept addressing students. We don't know this yet. We're going to learn it. And I even I have written down that you said, we'll work on it. You're not putting a stopping point. You don't know it, you'll never know it. It's we're going to work on it together, and the fact that you said we'll work on it allows the students to see the collaboration and see that you're there to help them. To add to the classroom climate, you also, in the back of your room, and you addressed it in the lesson, the reference to a disagreeing politely poster, and I think that will go a long way, because you were modeling it for the students, and then it's there for them as a visual constantly.
Yeah.
So that was a very good part. I mean, you're just an energetic teacher as is, and I really think that pulls a lot of the students in as well.
Yeah.
And so that pairs with the next area of strength I have for you, the student engagement. Like you said, you're using a lot of the Kagan structures, the shoulder partner, face partner. You did take off, touch down. It was really funny because you were at the back of the room and they were having a conversation about something, and Hugh just said, "I'm getting excited, I'm running up there," and all the kids were like, "Oh my gosh, Mr. Short's running," and it was really fun. And then there was a point where you wanted a choral response from the class, and there were a few that were very hesitant to participate. And so when you did we got to get our lips warmed up, and you did that activity with them, that was really funny. And the numerator denominator voices, I was in there probably 2 weeks ago when you had first introduced it, and so to see it carried out for another week, and the students owned it this time, that you didn't even have to remind them, they just did it.
I just really want that to, when we get into fractions, it's that's all they hear is just those voices, because then that vocabulary is already set before we even get there.
Right.
So,
right.
I just like making voices. So.
The all right round robin that you were doing with the, it's not independent practice, but with partners, that it was very good. The students respond to it. My question for that is, could we lay out the directions? Because as the fourth grade, even though the fourth grade teachers have been trained in the Kagan structures, if that's not one they feel strongly on, maybe these students haven't had those experiences.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I would like to, you've got it set right there. Yep. I have those in my classroom, and it's that whole, when we went to the training and she had her stress and then go like this.
Right.
And it's that whole summer went by, and even though I wrote about it this summer, my arms have gone back to this. Yeah. So yeah, I think when I read this, I thought that would be I just need to pull that out and put it on the board, and it's just there while they. And also, what's really funny is that when I was explaining it, I was like, "Am I doing this right? I can't. Is that how we do this one?" So it would be helpful for me as well to review.
Well, and even if you didn't put this up, if you took 5 to 7 minutes with the students and have them be going through the process again, and you writing it on chart paper with them, so they're discussing it, and then you can just flip back to that chart if you need to.
I'm finding that I'm creating these anchor charts, and I've got things up in my room and office, and I'm like, I have no wall space to put any of these, so I need to reevaluate what is on my wall, what is important, what's really important, what do I need, and I'm finding that there are things that I'm like, that's got to come down so that I can put the anchor charts up. So,
another area of strength, and I added this, and I add it confidently because I have known you as a colleague, a fellow educator in the past, and I actually adopted your lesson plan format. I know that all of your lessons are completely aligned to the Common Core, and you always make a point on your lesson plans to have it listed. So as far as that goes, I am confident that instructional alignment is something you strive for.
Yeah.
To go back to student engagement, because in our pre-observation that you had expressed that you wanted me to take data on, and I only printed one of these, Two. To do the at task data compilation for you. And so overall, you had the solid majority of your students, and I did it for the 20 minutes. And you had students in and out for the bathroom, and some were coming back from perhaps special ed, or coming in tardy for the day, I'm not sure. But beyond the active engagement, the next closest one was the passively engaged, which everybody's going to go through those stages in lessons. None of this was a shock to see, because I think it's pretty typical in a classroom. And, you know, we discussed all the things that you're doing for student engagement to keep them up. So these are really great numbers. And if you went and calculated percentages out, you would be right at the top there.
Great.
So,
good.
I think I say that to you. It's good. So for transitions, and I know that this is one that Mrs. Henderson, our principal, always looks for. They're in between your board math, which is what we started at, to when students went back and did their recipe, which is what we refer to it as in the pre-observation. It was a 40-second transition. And so in the grand scheme of things, in that day, it wasn't a lot of time, but as we've looked at it in the past, you take the 40 seconds times how many transitions a day, times how many days in the school year, and you figure that out. So just some thoughts there. What other ways could you signal a transition for your students? I remember reading in Kagan about the trigger word. And when purple's my trigger word. When I say purple, then you go. So you're giving all of the instructions and then purple. So students, because a lot of them want to get up and move right away, and a lot of them don't want to listen to directions. So giving them just that one little piece could be really powerful there. Also, just putting them on the clock. We have 20 seconds to get back, because an expectation in your room is to be organized and ready to go.
And we really need to, I would say that a weakness of mine as a teacher is that I don't practice enough. As a student, I was a pleaser. I wanted to do everything right, so you didn't have to ask me or tell me twice. I just did. And I'm finding that with this group, they're just not, I wouldn't say they're reluctant to follow expectations, but they are slow to get there, and that we need to really, I need to set aside some time where we just practice. And part of my problem is that by 5th grade, I wrongly assumed that, well, when I say you've got this much time, that's how much time you have. And so really it's just a practice thing that I think that we need to, and the expectations between different classrooms, like my classroom is different from this one. So it would be good for me to try the trigger word, maybe just practice, like, I see we're not moving quick enough, so let's come back and let's really get this nailed so that we're not.
Well, and to go with that practice piece, a lot of students don't even know what 30 seconds feels like in reality. They're just going through their day. So with the practicing, they can kind of gauge it themselves after they've had experiences, so to speak, with the 30-second time frame. So
I've
that's
also
just
done like a countdown clap thing, which used to really work, and I just haven't used it this year because a summer came and went. And
things come and go.
I forgot.
Yes. All right. Let's see. We discussed the all right round robin. And those. One area, and I know that this is new to the 5th grade math block, and we actually just discussed it this morning in 5th grade PLC, was the ESL support that comes in during your math block. And this is, on everyone, the grade level. But what personally are your expectations for the ESL support?
You know, honestly, my expectations for ESL support is that, so there are 2 ESL people that come in, but it's the actual ESL teacher that comes in during math. The other, the ESL para supports during a different time, I feel. It doesn't, I don't think it's during math. But so my expectation for the ESL teacher that comes in is that there is an understanding of what we're working on, and that it looks like, in my head, it would be a small group support for the vocabulary that is associated with that lesson, or it's small group support for, yesterday we were working on this and you did not, it looks like it challenged you, so we're going to go back and use those reteach worksheets, and we're going to, in a small group setting, so that those students are receiving that additional support that they need or are allowed because of their language barrier or the work that they're doing.
Okay. So with that, and I know when I was a classroom teacher, I experienced it as well. Anytime an additional person came into the room, there was always an area of concern for me. Do you have any about having an additional set of hands in the classroom?
I do. I personally don't like to lose control. At the same time, I don't like having to create lesson plans for somebody else because I have a significant number of students that I'm responsible for, and the planning aspect of that, and monitoring the day-to-day growth and tracking that, like what progress it is. So I suppose if I were to say that, like what kind of concern I would have, it is that I want the support for these students to be what they actually need and beneficial, as opposed to someone just coming in and piggybacking off of what's happening. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I think about this, and I think about, like, for instance, Miss Hingenthron or Miss Dunlop. At no point do they come to me and say, what do you want me to do? They have this plan, and they have, like, and it could be that they have really specific goals. And so I'm expecting that the ESL teacher has goals for the students that either align with the team or, you know, and absolutely, you know, we have a shared data spreadsheet, so she should have access to that. But I feel like there should be like, what are these kids' goals? What do we have? What are their goals? We're so specific in all these areas, and I just want some specificity. That's it, specificity as to what their goal, like what's their goal in that. Because so often you think of ESL as a language arts support, and so it's interesting that that support is happening during math. So I just want to my biggest concern is that they're not getting the language support, which in my past experience with Ms. Didful, who was working on our team last year, like it was so, like, they were grouped very specifically, they were working on very specific skills. And I guess my only concern is that if the teacher is in there for 30 minutes and there is no intended focus, and if that focus is created by me, well then I might as well do the small group myself. So that would be my only real concern about that support during that time.
And I think that would be an area shared by most individuals who have an ESL support person coming in, and that being a new thing this year. So it is something to bring up during a PLC and have a collective set of goals, not just you.
And I do feel like we kind of spoke to that this morning when we identified our math SMART goal and said, well, if this is what our goal is, then perhaps this is something that ESL can support in that manner.
Okay. So, Donnie, just as a closure, because we've gotten through the the areas of growth, and I really think, you know, we have some good ideas on the transitions, and the ESL support is something we can develop as a PLC. And then your areas of strength are nothing new to you. Just as closure, can you summarize, and you know, feel free to look back, you know, your strengths, your areas of growth, and any future plans you have?
Yep.
For.
So I'm just going to kind of follow the same format that we used. So, you know, even though we've identified some of the strengths as with classroom climate and student engagement, using the Kagan structures and the instructional alignment, like having those listed in my, I feel like even though they're strengths, they're still able to be developed. I'm only in my 3rd year of teaching, so constantly searching for ways to still create an even stronger classroom climate, more student engagement, specifically like reviewing the Kagan structures that we've learned and just refamiliarizing myself with those. And then the instructional alignment, like it just trips my trigger. I love having the standards in there and just making sure I'm getting everything. Looking back at the engagement of the class, you know, I would like to, I don't necessarily know that it's completely, I don't know if someone could have 100% engagement the whole time.
Right.
But thinking of what the proficiency level that we hold our students accountable to, I always kind of see that as for me, a starting point of like percentage for me. So I would like to see the passively engaged number diminish a little bit to make sure that I have more. And I think that some of that can happen again through those Kagan structures and just again providing a variety of engagement structures, because it could be that what's happening is I'm getting passive involvement because they're like, oh, my face partner again. Oh, that person again. So maybe it's they're moving to a different seat that correlates with where they're sitting in the seat. For transitions, you know, just the utilizing the countdown clap thing that I'd like to use, possibly even just putting, I lost all my Kagan timers when we got the new computer. But you know, a timer up on the board, or even just a quick.
Happens sometimes in the middle of evaluations.
Just a quick countdown, you know, like watching the clock. You've got 30 seconds. We're down to 15 seconds, 5 seconds. You know, just something that helps them feel, like you suggested, feel that this is what 30 seconds feels like. And if I'm not ever saying, here we are, this much, they don't feel that, and maybe that will help. And then trying out the trigger word, you know, just saying when I say go, or when I say popcorn, you're gonna pop up and go, you know, something like that. And then when I am working on a Kagan structure, taking the time to review the structure, you know, with a group of students, and possibly put that on the overhead or create an anchor chart that they have available. And then with regards to ESL support, just making sure that as we move forward with this new aspect of the team environment, this new inclusion of ESL in mathematics, that, you know, one of our norms, collaborative norms that we added this year was leaning into discomfort and understanding that we are, when we reach those uncomfortable points, it's not us necessarily fighting with each other, it's passionate people trying to do the best thing for students, and just making sure that as we monitor that new relationship, that we make sure that it's led and directed by student, what's most valuable for the student, and that we just keep monitoring that and adjusting it as need be, and find a way that gives the students what they need.
Great. Do you have any questions for me regarding this process? Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.